What are your favorite disturbing but interesting facts? Story 1. I've got a bunch from the animal kingdom. 1. The life cycle of a lot of wasps. Typically, a lot of them are venomous, so when it's time to lay eggs, the female goes and finds an unsuspecting target like a caterpillar and stings it. This causes it to paralyze but not die, after which the wasp drags it to her burrow. There she lays her eggs inside the caterpillar's body and lets them grow. When it's time to hatch, the baby wasps hatch inside the caterpillar and start eating the thing alive. All this while, the caterpillar is still paralyzed, but not dead, keeping the meat fresh, so to speak. For their parts, the wasp babies are evolved so that they know to eat around the critical organs of the caterpillar, so they're able to keep it alive all that time. Eventually, they pretty much eat the entire caterpillar except those parts and fly out into the world to continue the circle of life and death. Also, I find this a great case against the idea of a benevolent God. If this was how the world was intentionally designed, that guy is a psychopath. Story 2. Chronostasis. You're constantly missing teeny pieces of what's going on, and your brain just patches it over so you won't notice. Oversimplified visual example. Your eye tells your brain to basically ignore input processing when your eyes change targets, preventing motion blur when you move your eyes. This is called a saccade. When you're done moving your eyes, your brain gets a signal that it can start processing input again, and it just fills in the missed time with whatever it starts observing after the pause. In the same way, your brain fills in your visual blind spot. It fills in the temporal blind spot with surrounding data. It fakes what you missed during the saccade to fill in the gap, but it's your brain, so you don't really notice except when you get a temporal hint, exposing the flaw, like when you quickly look at a clock out of the blue and notice it seems to take a little bit longer for that first second on the second hand to click over, or when you place a phone call, then while it's ringing, divert your attention away. Maybe set the phone down while waiting for the recipient to answer, then reassert your attention, or pick the phone back up to your ear. It seems like there is a longer than normal silence, so you say, "Hello?" Then it rings, seemingly delayed. Story 3. I have to post a few. There's a neurological phenomenon where a person only knows half of themselves and other things to exist. So, someone could go through their life not acknowledging that their right side, for example, actually exists, or the right side of anything at all. If asked to draw someone, they will only draw the side that exists to them. It's impossible to get them to understand they and other things have two sides. They'll only eat one side of their food on a plate unless you turn it in for them to show the other side. They will sit on their one hand and not even feel it, will not see things with their one eye, can't understand you or other things have two sides, and cannot walk, and there's no way to fix it. Double-jointed people, hyper-joint mobility syndrome, are more prone to being internally decapitated, where their cervical neck spine can sever with enough force, pulling the head away from the body. However, it's internally decapitated because the skin is never broken and no external bleeding occurs. Granted, it's still a rare thing to happen, but more likely for these types of people. You're also more likely to develop osteoarthritis in those joints, which is extremely painful. Sorry guys, jaguars have such powerful jaws they can crush a deer's skull in one bite. And, yes, they kill their prey by not going for the throat, but by crushing its skull in its jaws. The average person will walk by at least 3 murderers in a month. Story 4. Nematodes. In short, if all the matter in the universe except the nematodes were swept away, our world would still be dimly recognizable. And if, as disembodied spirits, we could then investigate it, we should find its mountains, hills, vales, rivers, lakes, and oceans represented by a film of nematodes. The location of towns would be decipherable. since for every massing of human beings, there would be a corresponding massing of certain nematodes. Trees would still stand in ghostly rows representing our streets and highways. The location of the various plants and animals would still be decipherable, and, had we sufficient knowledge, in many cases even their species could be determined by an examination of their erstwhile nematode parasites. Story 5. The Peacock Mantis. Shrimp is a fascinating animal. It has the best vision of the animal kingdom, allowing them to see 10 times more color than humans, including ultraviolet and infrared lights. They can also see the polarization of the light. But their eyes are not the most interesting feature they have. These creatures have the fastest punch among all living things. It is estimated that they can hit something at 50 to 80 kilometers an hour, which is particularly impressive considering they live in water. And because their arms end in heavy clubs, they're able to create small flashes of light by lowering the pressure of the water, thus boiling it. The boil creates bubbles that collapse very quickly and release huge amounts of energy. These shrimps can break the glass of an aquarium or the shell of other crustaceans. Story 6. The Soviet Union cared so little about the lives of their soldiers that during the Battle of Stalingrad, there were separate squads that would hang behind an attacking force with machine guns and would shoot any man who retreated, even if the soldiers were fleeing from an advancing German unit that was better armed and better trained. To them, retreat was treason, and any officer who failed to perform his duty and fight to the last man would be executed as a traitor. There was a rapid turnover in the Red Army Officer Corps as many chose to off themselves as an alternative to a public firing squad. At most, 10% of all Soviet casualties during the Battle of Stalingrad were a combination of soldiers ending themselves and executions by the Red Army itself. 10% of 3 million dead men. Story 7. Cancer often takes years or decades to become a problem. We all have dozens of tiny pinhead-sized clusters of cancer cells in our bodies, but most of the time conditions for them to grow out of control are somewhat rare. Usually when someone is diagnosed with cancer, the original cluster of cancer cells has been growing inside the person's body for many years. Took care of a lady a few weeks ago who started complaining of a little darkness in her vision, way out in the periphery. The first thought is something eye-related, such as a retinal detachment, lining of the back of the eye that detects, transmits light, or maybe a little blockage in one of her retinal arteries. Turns out a scan of her brain showed a softball-sized tumor right in the front of her brain. Who knows how long it's been there growing, completely silent, terrifying. Story 8. There's a messed up worm called a bobbit worm that lives burrowed into coral in the ocean, where it waits and ambushes fish and crabs and such, with razor-sharp pincers that often immediately cut its prey in half. But it gets worse from there. Their jaws are so powerful they can chew up rock-solid coral and cut burrows into it. Their pincers have enough strength to shear through even thick bones. Did I mention yet that they grow up to 3 meters long, 9-10 feet? Yeah, because they do that. They also have venomous spines that cause permanent numbness after excruciating pain if you were to grab one. They're notorious for laying their near microscopic eggs inside coral that is sold to saltwater fish tank enthusiasts who start to notice various creatures in their tank disappearing or being cut into pieces. They can survive damn near anything and are borderline impossible to kill without taking the entire coral out and burning it or something. The best part, they're polychaetes, so if you cut one in half, the head and tail grow into 2 new worms like a hydra, and they can mate with each other and reproduce. Story 9. The Tokaimura nuclear accident. Due to not following safety protocols, a tank of radioactive liquid had a much higher concentration of uranyl nitrate than was safe. While adding more liquid, there was a bright flash of Cherenkov radiation followed by gamma radiation alarms. In that split second, both men near the tanks were dead. Their bodies just didn't know it yet. One man, Hisashi Uchi, was kept alive for 83 days before his body finally gave out. Even after his skin fell off, they attempted to graft it back on with tape. He was leaking bodily fluids faster than they could be replenished. He asked to be left to die for a brief moment while he was conscious, but the doctors ignored his request. Story 10. The amount of food wasted by companies, educational facilities, and organizations makes me so mad when you know there are so many starving or food insecure households. The worst part is the only reason it is not distributed before it goes bad all comes down to not wanting to take the time to help. Most places claim it's from liability. However, liability could easily be signed away when the food was picked up. Edit. Many people are commenting on liability reasoning. However, there are many ways to handle this. Signing agreements, liability exchanges, etc. Each avenue can work, but requires just a little more work. That is why I say it mostly boils down to, pun intended, the fact people do not want to take the time to make it happen. They would rather just not deal with it and throw away hundreds of pounds of food while people are starving in the local area and non-profits or organizations are having to make food themselves. Also, if the people who work for these non-profits or organizations did not have to focus on cooking the food and just transporting, maintaining the food, it would allow for a majorly higher impact at just a slight increase in price. I could rant all day on how this could work. However, it is unlikely to bear any fruit if you are someone who happens to work for a non-profit or something and is interested in the in-depth explanations that may be able to contribute to your efforts. PM me. If not, have a good day night anyway. Story 11. Things like prions, aneurysms, and many cancers can just kind of pop up without warning and kill you, and you can't do anything about it. Then there's the cosmic prion of false vacuum collapse. I don't even remotely understand the physics behind it, but from what I understand, the universe is theorized to exist in a kind of unstable state, and some cosmic imbalance has allowed for everything in our universe to exist. If this is true, there is a chance that at literally any moment, that imbalance could self-correct and the entire universe would be very quickly annihilated. Since the correction would expand out at light speed, we would have no warnings whatsoever. 1 second, you see the sun and the clouds and the blue sky, and the next second, you don't even exist. No rubble left behind or anything, just gone altogether. Story 12. Oh man, I just listened to a hardcore history podcast about public executions, so there's a lot of stuff now. Beyond holding gladiatorial combat and throwing convicts and slaves to be eaten by animals, the ancient Romans would also hold fatal charades, or stage plays in which the actors would be killed or maimed for real if that was the fate of their character. Some medieval executions lasted hours and involved ripping bits of flesh from the condemned body and pouring molten lead into the wounds. Or they would be strapped to a wheel and their bones broken with a large hammer. The breaking wheel was not confined to the distant past. The last use of the breaking wheel was in 1841. The only silver lining, if you can call it that, is that in later centuries, the condemned was usually strangled to death first, in secret. Contrary to our modern ideas of hanging being a quick snap of the neck, many people took several minutes to die from botched hangings. Even when the hanging went well, the rope was barely long enough to actually snap the neck, so you would die from suffocation instead. In botched cases, the executioner would have to pull down on the legs of the person hanging to ensure the rope was tight enough to fully obstruct the airway. Also contrary to our modern ideas of beheading, before the guillotine, beheadings by sword or axe often required multiple swings. Oh, and public executions continued until the 1930s in France and the US. They still occur in many places in the world, most famously in Saudi Arabia. Story 13. Everything on this earth is a game because we're essentially living in a floating rock spinning around our sun. Also, the vastness of the universe, possibly multiverse, is so big that we're essentially trying to make meaning of our lives. Everything you think that matters doesn't. Families, jobs, the government, money, drama, and reputation mean nothing to the universe. It's all a way to find meaning in our lives. And no, I'm not depressed. I'm just really curious about the world. The good thing, though, you were essentially born on this earth to live for yourself. So, whatever is holding you down, think to yourself that stuff doesn't matter and move on. Better yourself in fields that interest you. Story 14. Probably not the most disturbing, but so many atrocities occur in the world that barely affect us. Take what happened in Florida, for example. Of course, it was absolutely atrocious what happened. There were plenty of devastated families who would be affected for many years. I read a couple of articles about it and talked about it for a couple of minutes with several people, but that's pretty much it. I focused on my studies, I made jokes and laughed with my friends, I worked out at the gym, and all the while people were crying and holding wakes and memorials for those poor souls. As cold-hearted as this sounds, I don't care about what happened in Florida to make a drastic impact on my daily life. This applies to the majority of the US, except a pretty small percentage of the population, including the people directly impacted by the tragedy, and I suppose the anti-gun protests. This includes people in all countries that heard about this. It's just another day, and as disgusting as it is, another massacre will probably occur somewhere in the world tomorrow, and every day after that, and we just won't care at all to impact us significantly. Story 15, that environmentally we're screwed. Take for example all of the runoff from fertilizers and pesticides go into our waterways, which can pollute the waters and cause algal blooms, which then consume all of the oxygen in the water, which then can create dead zones in the water where there is no enough oxygen to support aquatic life. Gulf of Mexico, right where the Mississippi enters the ocean. Or take, for example, our water waste and how we are depleting aquifers at alarming rates, and they take hundreds of years to refill. There are cities running out of water: Cape Town, Sao Paulo, Beijing, Cairo, Jakarta, Mexico City, and some others. We are also increasing the acidification levels in the ocean, as well as its temperatures, to the point where 25% of our coral reefs are considered to be damaged beyond repair. There is so much more that we are doing, but it's bringing me down too much. The essential points are pollution and how human development has impacted the environment and its various biogeochemical cycles. Story 16. Sleep paralysis. The reason you don't run around when dreaming about running is that your brain actually semi-paralyzes your muscles to protect yourself. This is called atonia. However, sometimes when you are transitioning in or out of your REM cycle, your brain wakes up whilst your body is still in atonia, which means you wake up fully paralyzed. You can't even scream. Plus, because you're still in a dream state, you have vivid and terrifying hallucinations, the most common of which is the sense that someone is in the room with you. It's usually followed by pressure in the chest and a sense of dread. Up until the 19th century, it was believed to have been caused by literal demons. Sleep paralysis can last anything from 20 seconds to a few minutes, but time is different, whilst dreaming so feels a lot longer. You can't just wake yourself up either. You have to wait it out. What's most scary is that it can happen to anyone. Every time you go to sleep, it could potentially happen. Some people have it repeatedly, whilst others may only have it once in their life. Stress, depression, sleep deprivation, and other factors make you more likely to experience it, but ultimately there is no definitive cause, so sufferers can't really do much about it. Story 17. How hedge funds stay rich while companies' stocks fall. Hedge funds and other large investment entities borrow stock from Party A for an agreed time and sell high to other investors, Party B, betting that the value will drop when they're obligated to buy back the stock from Party B and return it to the original owner, Party A. So borrow and sell for 70 a share, but be obligated to buy back at 10, netting 60 per share for the hedge fund, which ended up not actually owning the stock they sold. They've been fleecing the markets for decades with this shady practice of shorting, and there have been allegations of fake shares being generated during the time of borrowing to further tamp down the overall price per share by the end date. GameStop fiasco. Story 18. There is this possible global extinction event called Rogue Earth. The point of it is to realize that there is no magic invisible track we call an orbit for our planet to move along on. It's the force of gravity doing all of the work. All it takes is a massive enough object to pass close enough to Earth to alter its orbit. It could be a rogue planet, star, or black hole. Not so fun fact. Rogue planets and rogue black holes just so happen to be two of the most difficult things to detect in space. As the name of this event suggests, this will possibly eject Earth from the solar system into the cold, dark, and empty void. Other scenarios include making the year shorter, longer, creating a very elliptical orbit with extreme summers, winters, sending Earth into a collision course with another planet or the Sun, disturbing the Moon, either ejecting it or causing it to collide with Earth, a more light-hearted scenario, being recaptured by another star, if in the habitable zone, and if at least microscopic life survived the freezing journey through space, life could start again around this new star, possibly for far longer than around the Sun, depending on the type of star and its age. As far as we know, there isn't much we can do about this. Yes, the chances of this happening are astronomically low, but it's never impossible. It really reminds you about how fragile life on Earth really is. Story 19. What we see is far from what you think you see. For example, our eyes actually perceive images upside down, but our brain flips them for us. But the way we perceive vision isn't just weird because of that, it gets a lot weirder. Light comes from the sun in its complete form of white visible light. That light is made up of every color we can see ever, commonly called the rainbow. We perceive colors when a pigment in some object absorbs only certain frequencies of light within the rainbow. What is not absorbed is what color we perceive. So basically, plants are green because they absorb lots of other colors of light except green, making it the complete opposite of green because it doesn't absorb that color. In summary, everything you see has been a lie. It's the opposite. Story 20. I don't know if this is a fact per se, as it is something I have observed anecdotally through life experiences, but it's that your degree of physical fitness has a very large impact on your social dating life and by extension your mental health. It's like night and day. You feel and are stronger, more confident, less anxious, calmer socially, etc. I went from a nervous wreck who couldn't look people in the eye to a relaxed dude who makes casual conversation with pretty much everyone. It's the magic pill all these self-help gurus have been spouting about for decades, yet only a minority of the population takes it seriously. Yet dudes are told to just be themselves and people will love you as you are. It's so crazy to me, and it sounds like some sort of grand conspiracy. People are just told working out is good for you, but are never told why. Story 21. Pluto may be the last object marked on schoolroom charts, but the solar system doesn't end there. In fact, it isn't even close to ending there. We won't get to the solar system's edge until we have passed through the Oort cloud, a vast celestial realm of drifting comets. Far from marking the outer edge of the solar system, as those schoolroom maps so cavalierly imply, Pluto is barely 1/50,000th of the way. Of course, we have no prospect of such a journey. Based on what we know now and can reasonably imagine, there is absolutely no prospect that any human being will ever visit the edge of our own solar system. Ever. It is just too far. Bill Bryson, A Short History of Nearly Everything Story. 22. I had a near-death-esque experience that changed my entire perspective, that basically changed me forever. Way too long, and almost impossible anyway to describe and tell about here, but there are a lot of accounts you can read about from other people that were similar in how much it forever changed how I view, think, and experience everything. The disturbing part to me is that most people will not experience or know what that is like. Story 23. Your body, while filled with amazing machinery and able to endure many things, is also quite fragile. You could die right now. You could get hit by a car. Your heart could give out from some problem you were unaware of. There could be an undetected CO2 leak in your house. Your work could be destroyed in a terrorist attack. The world is always under the threat of war. And even if you manage to evade and endure all that until you're 80, you will still die. In your bed, surrounded by a family that will have to pay your outstanding debts and for your funeral. And the younger grandchildren won't even understand it.